Maid forced the billionaire to pretend to be lost his fortune at his wedding day. What happened next? Alexander Chen stood in his penthouse office, the glittering skyline of Manhattan spreading beneath him like a kingdom he'd conquered. At 35, he'd built an empire, tech innovations that had revolutionized healthcare, investments that seemed to turn everything he touched into gold. His engagement to Victoria Ashford, a stunning corporate attorney from one of New York's oldest families, was set to be the social event of the season. "Mr. Chen, your tuxedo fitting is in an hour," came the gentle voice from the doorway. He turned to see Elena Martinez, his housekeeper of 3 years, standing with her hands folded, her dark eyes avoiding his gaze as they always did. At 28, she moved through his life like a whisper, cleaning, organizing, anticipating his needs before he voiced them. She was invisible in the way that made her essential. "Thank you, Elena," he said absently, returning to the architectural plans for his new research facility. But Elena didn't leave. Alexander noticed her hesitation, the way she shifted her weight from foot to foot. In 3 years, she'd never lingered. "Is something wrong?" he asked, a hint of concern creeping into his voice. Elena looked up, and for the first time, he truly saw her, the intelligence in her eyes, the quiet strength in her posture, the worry creasing her forehead. "Mr. Chen, I need to tell you something." "About Miss Ashford." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Elena, if this is about household matters." "It's not." She took a breath, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. 2 weeks ago, I was cleaning Miss Ashford's car as requested. Her phone rang, and she'd left it on the seat. The caller ID said, Marcus. I wouldn't have thought anything of it, but then I saw text messages on the screen. "Mr. Chen, she's been seeing someone else." The messages were explicit about how she'll secure your fortune through marriage and continue her affair afterward. The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Alexander felt his world tilt, but his face remained impassive, a skill learned from years of high-stakes negotiations. "That's a serious accusation," he said quietly. Elena reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out her phone. "I took pictures. I know it was wrong, but I couldn't let you." Her voice broke slightly. "You deserve better than someone who sees you as a bank account." Alexander looked at the screenshots. The evidence was damning. Victoria discussing his prenup terms, joking about playing the devoted wife, planning vacations with Marcus using Alexander's money. Each message was a knife to his chest, but what surprised him more was the emotion in Elena's eyes. Not triumph or vindication, but genuine sadness. For him. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked softly. "You could lose your job. Victoria would see to that." "Because it's right," Elena said simply. "My father always said that silence in the face of wrong is itself wrong. You're a good man, Mr. Chen. You donate millions to children's hospitals. You remember that my mother is sick and always ask about her. You deserve to be loved for who you are, not what you have." Something shifted in Alexander's chest. He'd been surrounded by people all his life, advisors, friends, family, but none had shown him this kind of unvarnished loyalty. "Elena," he said slowly, an idea forming in his mind. "What if we tested her? What if, on the wedding day, I pretended to lose everything?" Elena's eyes widened. "Mr. Chen, that's brilliant." He smiled for the first time that day. "Think about it. If Victoria truly loves me, she'll stand by me. If not, I'll know before I sign the marriage certificate." He paused, studying Elena's face. "But I'll need help pulling this off. Someone I can trust completely. Will you help me?" Elena stood silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. "What do you need me to do?" Over the next 2 weeks, they became co-conspirators. Alexander confided in his lawyer and accountant, both of whom had privately expressed concerns about Victoria. They helped construct an elaborate scenario, a disastrous investment, frozen assets, an FBI investigation into his business partner that implicated Alexander's funds. The wedding would go forward, but just before the ceremony, the news would break. As they planned, Alexander found himself looking forward to his evening meetings with Elena. She was whip-smart, catching details his own advisors missed. She challenged his assumptions, made him laugh with her dry observations about high society. She shared stories of growing up in her grandmother's small apartment, helping her mother clean houses while studying at community college, earning a degree in literature she'd never been able to use because bills had to be paid. "Why housekeeping?" he asked one evening, genuinely curious. Elena smiled sadly. "Because my mother got sick. Multiple sclerosis. The medical bills were crushing us. Your predecessor paid well, and when you took over the house, you kept me on and even increased my salary. That money pays for her medication, her physical therapy. It's given her 3 more years of mobility." She looked at him directly. "So when I say you're a good man, Mr. Chen, I'm not flattering you. I'm stating a fact I live with every day." Alexander felt something crack open inside him. "Call me Alexander," he said quietly. "When we're alone, at least." "Alexander," she repeated, and his name in her voice sounded like coming home. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, as if the universe itself hadn't gotten the memo about the impending disaster. Alexander stood in his dressing room, adjusting his bow tie in the mirror, when Elena entered with a folder. "The news breaks in 10 minutes, she said. "Last chance to back out." He met her eyes in the reflection. "Are you having doubts?" "I'm having doubts about watching you hurt," she admitted. "But no, I'm not having doubts about the truth needing to come out. Elena, whatever happens today, thank you. For your courage. For your honesty. For seeing me." She gave him a small smile. "That's what friends do." Friends. The word felt insufficient for what had grown between them, but Alexander didn't have time to examine that feeling. His phone buzzed. The first dominoes were falling. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a vision of ivory and gold, 300 guests seated in chairs decorated with white roses. Victoria stood in the bridal suite, a vision in Vera Wang, checking her reflection one more time. Through the walls, she could hear the string quartet playing. Alexander's best man, David, burst through the door, his face pale. "Alexander, thank God. Have you seen the news?" Victoria turned, irritation flashing across her perfect features. "David, you can't be in here." "Victoria, you're going to want to hear this too." David held up his tablet, and Alexander saw his own face on the financial news channel. The banner read, "Tech billionaire Alexander Chen's empire crumbles. FBI investigation reveals fraudulent partner, assets frozen." The report detailed how Alexander's business partner, Richard Townsend, had been running an elaborate Ponzi scheme using their shared investment fund. Alexander's personal fortune, all $2.3 billion, was frozen pending investigation. His properties were being seized. His accounts locked down. "This is impossible," Victoria said, snatching the tablet. But the news was everywhere. Bloomberg, Forbes, The Wall Street Journal. Alexander's lawyer appeared on screen, confirming that Mr. Chen was cooperating fully but was financially devastated. Alexander watched Victoria's face carefully. She cycled through shock, disbelief, and then something else, calculation. He could almost see her mind working, reassessing. "Alexander, darling," she said, her voice strained. "This is terrible. But surely some of your money is safe? The prenup protects your remaining assets for both of us." "There are no remaining assets," Alexander said flatly. "Everything is frozen or seized. The house, the cars, the accounts, everything. I have about $5,000 in an old checking account my grandmother set up when I was a kid. That's it." The color drained from Victoria's face. "But the wedding is paid for," Alexander said. "That money cleared weeks ago. We can still get married, Victoria. I'll rebuild. It might take years, but I'm still me. I still have my mind, my ideas." Victoria laughed, a harsh sound that made several bridesmaids look up in alarm. "Rebuild? Alexander, do you understand what you're saying? We're supposed to honeymoon in Bali. I've put a deposit down on a brownstone. I've already quit my job because you said I didn't need to work." "You're an attorney," Alexander said quietly, watching her carefully. "One of the best in the city. You can work again. In a mid-level firm, making $200,000 a year?" Victoria's mask was slipping. "I didn't sign up for that. I signed up to be Mrs. Alexander Chen, wife of a billionaire. That was the deal." "The deal?" Alexander repeated softly. "Victoria, I thought you loved me." She looked at him, and for a moment, something like guilt flickered across her face. Then it hardened. I do love you, Alexander. The you who could give me the life I deserve. The you who was someone. This person standing here with nothing. She gestured at him dismissively. This isn't who I agreed to marry. The bridesmaids were openly staring now. David looked sick. But Alexander felt strangely calm, as if he were watching the scene from a great distance. So you're saying you won't marry me, he said. I'm saying I need time, Victoria backpedaled, perhaps realizing how she sounded. This is a shock. We should postpone. No. The word came from the doorway. Elena stood there in her simple black dress, not a guest, but present as per their plan. No postponing. He deserves an answer right now, Miss Ashford. Will you marry him or not? Victoria whirled on her. Who the hell are you to speak to me? You're the housekeeper. I'm someone who knows the truth, Elena said calmly, walking into the room. I know about Marcus. I know about the text messages. I know you were never going to be faithful to Alexander. You were going to take his money and continue your affair. Victoria's face went crimson. You little, how dare you, those messages were private. So you don't deny it, Alexander said, his voice like ice. The room fell silent. Victoria looked between them, trapped, her carefully constructed world collapsing. When she spoke again, her voice was cold. Fine. You want the truth? Yes, I was seeing Marcus. Yes, I was going to continue seeing him. Because Marcus excites me in ways your spreadsheets and charity galas never could. But Marcus is a high school teacher with a brownstone in Brooklyn. He can't give me what I need. You could. That was the arrangement, whether you knew it or not. An arrangement, Alexander repeated. Not a marriage. Oh, grow up, Alexander, Victoria snapped. Half the marriages in our social circle are arrangements. You get a beautiful wife who looks perfect at your fundraisers and knows which fork to use. I get financial security and the lifestyle I deserve. It's how the world works. It's not how my world works, Alexander said quietly. He turned to David. Can you inform the guests that the wedding is cancelled? Tell them the truth, that Victoria and I have realized we're not right for each other. Offer them my apologies and encourage them to stay for the reception. The food is paid for, and it shouldn't go to waste. You're going to humiliate me in front of 300 people? Victoria's voice rose to a shriek. You humiliated yourself, Elena said softly. Alexander is giving you the gift of a simple explanation. He could tell them everything. Victoria grabbed her phone and her clutch, her hands shaking with rage. You'll regret this, both of you. My father is one of the most powerful attorneys in New York. I'll make sure you never work again, she spat at Elena. Then to Alexander, and you're nothing without your money. You're just another boring, idealistic fool who thinks love matters more than reality. Good luck living in mediocrity. She stormed out, her bridesmaids scrambling after her, casting confused glances back at Alexander. The door slammed. Silence fell. Alexander sat down heavily on one of the silk chairs, the adrenaline that had sustained him through the confrontation suddenly draining away. David quietly excused himself to make the announcements. Elena remained, standing a respectful distance away. Are you all right? She asked softly. Alexander looked up at her, this woman who had risked everything to show him the truth. I don't know, he admitted. I thought I loved her. But what I'm feeling right now isn't heartbreak. It's relief. And that's somehow worse because it means I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. Elena moved closer, her dark eyes full of understanding. You loved who you thought she was. That's not wrong. It's human. She called me boring, Alexander said with a weak laugh. And you know what? She's not entirely wrong. I am boring. I like spreadsheets. I like planning. I like knowing the variables. There's nothing boring about integrity, Elena said firmly. There's nothing boring about kindness. There's nothing boring about a man who remembers his housekeeper's mother and asks about her health. Those aren't boring traits, Alexander. They're rare ones. He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the woman who had been in his life for 3 years but invisible until she'd chosen to be seen. You risked your job for me. For someone you barely know. I know you better than you think, Elena said quietly. I've watched you for 3 years. I've seen you cry at the letter from a child your foundation helped. I've seen you work until 2 a.m. not because you're greedy, but because you're trying to solve a problem that will help thousands of people. I've seen who you are when no one's watching, and that person is worth saving from someone like Victoria Ashford. The vulnerability in her voice made Alexander stand. They were close now, closer than employer and employee should be. He could see gold flecks in her brown eyes, the slight tremor of her hands that betrayed her composure. "Elena," he stuttered, but then his phone rang. His lawyer. "Alexander, we need to talk," James said without preamble. "Now that the wedding is officially cancelled, we should begin the process of unfreezing your assets and—" "Wait," Alexander interrupted. "Cancel?" "James, nothing is cancelled. The wedding isn't happening, but the test isn't over. An idea was forming, wild and probably insane. Don't unfreeze anything yet. I need a few more days." "Alexander, what are you planning?" "Something I should have done years ago," he said, looking at Elena. "I'm planning to live." 3 days after the cancelled wedding, Alexander stood outside a small apartment building in Queens, a neighborhood he'd probably driven through but never really seen. The building was old but well-maintained, with window boxes of geraniums and a bodega on the corner. He was wearing jeans and a plain black t-shirt, the most casual clothes he'd owned, purchased from a Target with the money from that old account his grandmother had set up. Elena answered his knock, surprise evident on her face. She was wearing shorts and a loose shirt, her hair in a ponytail, looking nothing like the formal housekeeper he'd known and somehow even more beautiful. "Alexander, what are you doing here? Is everything all right? Can I come in?" he asked. "I have a proposition for you." Elena's small apartment was neat and cozy, filled with books and photographs. A hospital bed was set up in the living room, where a woman who was clearly Elena's mother lay sleeping. The equipment hummed softly, a ventilator, monitors. "She has good days and bad days," Elena said quietly, seeing his gaze. "Today is a medium day. She was asking about you, actually. She saw the news about the wedding. She was worried." "She was worried about me?" Alexander said, oddly touched. "My mother has a big heart. Too big, my father used to say." Elena moved to the tiny kitchen. "Coffee?" "It's not the Blue Mountain blend you're used to, but it's hot." "Elena, stop," Alexander said gently. "You don't have to serve me. I'm not here as your employer." She turned, uncertain. "Then why are you here?" Alexander took a breath. "Because I've been thinking a lot about what Victoria said. About living in mediocrity. About reality versus love. And I realized something. I have no idea what reality is." He gestured around the small apartment. "This is more real than anything in my penthouse. Your mother's courage is more real than anything in my bank account. What you did for me, risking everything for truth, that's the most real thing anyone has ever done for me." Elena leaned against the counter, arms crossed, guarded. "What are you saying, Alexander?" "I'm saying I want to learn what real life is like. Before I unfreeze my assets, before I go back to being Alexander Chen, billionaire CEO, I want to live like Alexander Chen, ordinary person. I want to get a job, pay rent, figure out what matters when money isn't a buffer against the world." He paused. "And I want you to teach me." Elena stared at him. "You want me to teach you to be poor?" "I want you to teach me to be human," he corrected. "Not the version of human where I can solve any problem by throwing money at it. The version where I have to figure things out, make choices, live with consequences." "Alexander, this is crazy," Elena said, but he could see the interest in her eyes. "You can't just pretend to be ordinary. You've never taken public transit, never worried about a late fee, never had to choose between buying medicine or buying food. This isn't a game." "I know it's not a game," Alexander said seriously. "That's exactly why I need to do it. Elena, I almost married someone who saw me as an ATM machine. I've been surrounded by people who want something from me my entire adult life. I need to know who I am when I can't write a check. I need to know if I'm worth anything beyond my net worth." Elena's expression softened. You're worth everything beyond your net worth. Then help me prove it, he challenged. Help me live a real life, just for a few weeks. If I can't hack it, I'll admit defeat and go back to my bubble. But if I can learn to be the kind of person who doesn't need $1 billion to matter. He trailed off, not quite sure how to finish that sentence. Elena studied him for a long moment, then sighed. You're serious about this? Completely. Where will you stay? Your penthouse is part of the frozen assets. Alexander pulled out a flyer he'd picked up from the bodega. There's a room for rent 3 blocks from here. $300 a week, shared bathroom. I called the landlord this morning. Elena laughed in disbelief. Alexander Chen in a boarding house. This I have to see. Then her expression turned more serious. But I can't be your guide if I'm your employee. You understand that, right? This only works if we're equals. You're fired, Alexander said immediately. I'm what? As of 3 days ago, I no longer employ you. The house is part of the frozen assets anyway. You're free, Elena. Which means if you help me, you do it as a friend, not an employee. No obligation, no power dynamic. Just 2 people trying to figure life out. Something shifted in Elena's eyes. Friends, she repeated slowly. Unless you'd rather not have anything to do with the guy whose wedding you just helped sabotage, Alexander said with a self-deprecating smile. You sabotaged your own wedding, Elena corrected. I just provided the match. She was quiet for a moment, then seemed to come to a decision. Okay, I'll help you. But you follow my rules. You do everything I say. You don't complain, you don't cut corners, and the moment you pull the "I'm actually a billionaire" card, the experiment ends. Agreed. Agreed, Alexander said, feeling a thrill of excitement and terror. Elena's mother stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Elena, she called weakly. Is someone here? They moved to the bedside. Elena took her mother's hand gently. Mama, this is Alexander. Alexander, this is my mother, Rosa. Rosa's eyes, so like her daughter's, focused on Alexander. You're the one from the news, she said in accented English. The wedding that didn't happen. That's me, Alexander confirmed, taking her other hand gently. Elena has been very kind to me. My Elena has a kind heart, Rosa said, smiling weakly. Too kind sometimes. She thinks she has to save everyone. Mama, Elena protested softly. It's true, Rosa continued, looking at Alexander with surprising intensity. She gives and gives. Make sure you give back, young man. Don't just take from my daughter. I promise, Alexander said, feeling the weight of that promise. I'm actually here to learn from her. Rosa nodded, satisfied, her eyes already closing again. Good. Learn well. She's the best teacher. As Rosa drifted back to sleep, Elena squeezed her mother's hand and stood. She tires easily, she explained. She's remarkable, Alexander said. Both of you are. Elena smiled sadly. She was a teacher in Colombia before we came here. High school literature. But her credentials didn't transfer, and then she got sick. She always says her real legacy is teaching me, but I know she misses the classroom. An idea sparked in Alexander's mind, but he filed it away for later. First, he had to learn to live in the real world. The next morning, Alexander moved into his room in the boarding house. It was tiny, barely large enough for a twin bed, a dresser, and a small desk. The shared bathroom down the hall had questionable water pressure. His neighbors were a revolving door of people, students, immigrants, workers between jobs. It was nothing like his penthouse. It was perfect. Elena showed up at 8 a.m. sharp. Ready for your first lesson? What's the lesson? Getting a job. She handed him a newspaper, circled sections in red. These are entry-level positions you're qualified for. No degree requirements, no special skills. Dishwasher, delivery driver, warehouse worker, retail associate. Alexander looked at the ads, reality sinking in. I have an MBA from Stanford. Which is currently worth exactly nothing, Elena said cheerfully. Come on, billionaire. Time to join the workforce. They spent the day going from business to business. Alexander filled out applications, experienced rejection after rejection. Places wanted references he didn't have, experience he couldn't prove, availability he couldn't guarantee. "This is humiliating," he admitted after the seventh. "We'll call you." "Welcome to job hunting," Elena said without sympathy. "Now you know what most people go through. Keep trying." Finally, at a busy diner in Midtown, the owner, a harried woman named Donna, looked at him critically. "Ever washed dishes?" "No," Alexander admitted. "But I'm a fast learner, I'm reliable, and I need the work." Donna sighed. "Can you start tomorrow? Breakfast shift, 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. $9 an hour." Alexander did quick math. After taxes, that was maybe $60 a day. But he nodded. "I'll be here." Outside, Elena high-fived him. "You got a job. Congratulations." Alexander stared at her. "I'm going to be washing dishes for $9 an hour." "And?" Elena challenged. "Is that job less worthy than running a tech company? Someone has to wash those dishes. Someone has to make sure families have clean plates for their meals. That someone is now you, and you should be proud." Her words hit him like a revelation. She was right. He'd eaten in countless restaurants, never thinking about the person in the back making it possible. Now he would be that person. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not letting me feel sorry for myself." Elena's expression softened. "Alexander, you're capable of so much more than you realize. But not because of your money or your education. Because of who you are. This experiment, it's going to prove that to you." As they walked back to the boarding house through the evening crowds, Alexander felt something he hadn't felt in years: excitement about the unknown. Every corner held possibility, every stranger had a story. He wasn't insulated anymore, separate, above. He was part of the flow of humanity. "Elena," he said as they reached her building, "why are you really helping me? You could have walked away after the wedding." She looked at him, and in the golden light of the setting sun, she was stunning. "Because everyone deserves a chance to discover who they really are," she said. "Even billionaires. Maybe especially billionaires." "And what do you think I'll discover?" he asked. Elena smiled. "That's for you to find out. See you tomorrow, Alexander. Don't be late for your first day." As he walked the 3 blocks to his boarding house, Alexander pulled out his wallet. Inside was a single business card: James, his lawyer. One call and this would all end. His assets would be unfrozen, his life restored. He put the wallet away. Not yet. He had dishes to wash and a life to discover. For the first time in years, he couldn't wait for tomorrow. The alarm went off at 4:15 a.m., dragging Alexander from dreams of balance sheets and boardrooms into the cold reality of his boarding house room. He stumbled to the shared bathroom, waited for a student to finish showering, and made it to the diner by 4:50 a.m. Donna looked him over critically. "You're early." "Good. Miguel will train you." Miguel was 62, with hands scarred from decades of restaurant work and eyes that had seen everything. He spoke with the patience of someone who'd trained 1,000 green employees. "The secret to dishes," he said, handing Alexander rubber gloves, "is rhythm. You think too much, you get backed up. You find your rhythm, you flow." He demonstrated, his movements economical and precise. "Your job is simple but important. No clean dishes, restaurant closes. Never forget that." For the first hour, Alexander was terrible. He dropped plates, couldn't keep up with the pace, splashed scalding water on his arms. His Stanford MBA hadn't prepared him for the relentless tsunami of dirty dishes from a breakfast rush. "Breathe," Miguel advised. "Find the rhythm." Gradually, something clicked. Alexander stopped thinking about each dish and let his body learn the pattern. Scrape, rinse, load, unload, repeat. The work was hard, mindless, and somehow meditative. There was no room for worrying about the future or regretting the past. There was only this dish, this moment, this task. During his break, he collapsed at a back table, his hands wrinkled and red despite the gloves. Elena appeared, carrying a bag from the bodega. "Brought you lunch. How's it going?" I think every muscle in my body hurts, Alexander admitted. Including muscles I didn't know I had. Welcome to physical labor, Elena said, unwrapping a sandwich for him. But you showed up. That counts. Miguel says I'm getting the hang of it, Alexander said with something that might have been pride. He told me about his life. Came here from Guatemala 30 years ago, sent 3 kids to college on restaurant wages. His youngest is a nurse. Elena, I've negotiated billion-dollar deals that felt less meaningful than washing dishes next to Miguel. Elena smiled. You're learning. That became his routine. Wake at 4:15, work at the diner until 2 p.m., come home exhausted, collapse. But on his 3rd day, Elena knocked on his door at 3 p.m. Come on. You're not done yet. Elena, I can barely move. That's the difference between the rich and everyone else, she said firmly. We don't get to be done. My shift at the grocery store starts at 4. You're coming with me. You work at a grocery store? Alexander said, struggling to his feet. I thought. You thought housekeeping paid enough to cover my mother's medical bills? Elena laughed without humor. I work 3 jobs, Alexander. Housekeeping in the mornings when I have it, grocery store in the evenings, and weekends at a laundromat. That's reality for most people. Alexander felt shame wash over him. He'd increased her salary and thought himself generous, never realizing it wasn't enough. Elena, I didn't know. Because you never asked, she said, not unkindly. Come on. I got you an interview with my manager. Stock boy position just opened up. By the end of the week, Alexander had 2 jobs. Dishes in the morning, stocking shelves in the evening. He worked 12-hour days, came home too tired to think, and slept like the dead. His hands developed calluses. His back ached constantly. And slowly, gradually, something shifted inside him. He learned names. Stories. Maria at the diner was saving for her daughter's quinceanera. Tommy, the cook, was a veteran with PTSD who found peace in the precise timing of short-order cooking. At the grocery store, elderly Mr. Park taught him to stack cans with geometric precision while sharing stories of the Korean War. You're a quick study, Mr. Park said approvingly. Most young people, they don't listen. You listen. I'm learning that I never listened before, Alexander admitted. 2 weeks into his new life, Alexander was restocking produce when he heard a familiar voice. Elena! Darling, how are you? He peered around the display to see Elena hugging an elderly woman in expensive clothes, a woman Alexander recognized as Mrs. Pemberton, one of his mother's society friends. Mrs. Pemberton, it's so good to see you, Elena said warmly. How's your hip? Much better, dear. That surgeon you recommended was excellent. Mrs. Pemberton patted Elena's hand. I wanted to tell you, I heard about the Chen wedding disaster. What a mess. I always thought that Victoria girl was too perfect to be real. And poor Alexander, losing everything like that. Have you heard from him? Alexander froze, waiting for Elena's response. He's doing well, Elena said carefully. Finding his way. I hope so. He was always kind, that boy. Too trusting, perhaps, but kind. His mother would be proud of how he handled the scandal with dignity. Mrs. Pemberton sighed. Well, I should let you work. But Elena, dear, if you ever need anything, you call me. You were so wonderful with my mother before she passed. That kind of compassion doesn't go unnoticed. After Mrs. Pemberton left, Alexander approached. Elena startled. Alexander! I didn't know you were working today. Every day, he said. Mrs. Pemberton, you took care of her mother? Elena looked uncomfortable. For a few months, before your family hired me. She had Alzheimer's. Mrs. Pemberton needed someone patient, and I. She shrugged. I loved her. Mrs. Pemberton paid for my mother's scooter as a thank you. I've never forgotten that kindness. Alexander was beginning to realize how little he'd known about the woman who'd moved through his house for 3 years. What else don't I know about you? Elena laughed. Alexander, we worked together for 3 years and probably had 5 personal conversations. There's a lot you don't know. Tell me, he said impulsively. After our shifts. Let's get dinner. Nothing fancy, just, tell me about your life. The real story. Something in Elena's eyes flickered, surprise, pleasure, and something more guarded. Okay, she said softly. Okay. That evening, they sat at a tiny Vietnamese restaurant, eating pho and sharing spring rolls. Elena talked about growing up in Colombia, her father's death when she was 12, immigrating with her mother at 15, learning English from library books, her mother's diagnosis when Elena was 20, the choice to put college on hold, to work, to survive. I was going to be a teacher, she admitted. Like my mother. I wanted to teach literature, help kids fall in love with stories. But life had other plans. It's not too late, Alexander said. Elena smiled sadly. It is, though. I'm 28. I have no degree, no time, no money to finish. My mother needs me. Those dreams are for other people. What if they don't have to be? Alexander said carefully. What if? Don't, Elena interrupted gently. Don't try to fix this with your money, Alexander. That's not the point of this experiment. I know, he said, frustrated. But Elena, you're brilliant. You deserve. I deserve what everyone deserves, she cut him off. A chance, yes. But millions of people don't get that chance. That's reality. You can't save everyone just because you have money. But I want to save you, Alexander said, the words coming out before he could stop them. The air between them suddenly changed, charged with an electricity that had been building for weeks. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and he saw everything in her eyes. The attraction she'd been fighting, the impossibility she'd accepted, the hope she didn't dare voice. Alexander, she said quietly, I'm not something to be saved. I'm not a project or a charity case. If you feel something for me, it has to be because of who I am, not because you want to rescue me from my life. I do feel something for you, Alexander admitted, his heart hammering. I have for weeks. Maybe longer. Maybe from the moment you showed me those texts and I realized you cared more about my happiness than your job. But you're right, I need to figure out who I am before I can figure out what that means. Elena reached across the table, taking his hand. Her palm was rough from work, warm, real. Then figure it out. Finish your experiment. Discover Alexander Chen, not the billionaire but the person. And then... She squeezed his hand. Then we'll see. It wasn't a rejection, but it wasn't acceptance either. It was something more honest, a recognition that timing mattered, that growth took time, that some things were worth waiting for. Over the next 2 weeks, Alexander threw himself into his work with new purpose. He picked up weekend shifts at the laundromat where Elena worked, learning to operate industrial washers and fold other people's clothes with precision. He started budgeting his money, feeling the stress of wondering if he'd have enough for rent, for food, for the unexpected expenses that could derail a life. His landlady, Mrs. Chen, no relation, needed help fixing the building's front steps. Alexander, who'd never held a hammer, worked alongside her son Bobby, learning basic carpentry. The steps weren't perfect, but they were solid, built with his own hands. You're not from around here, are you? Bobby asked one evening, as they cleaned up their tools. Alexander tensed. What makes you say that? Bobby laughed. Man, you talk like you swallowed a dictionary, and you apologize every time you mess up. Nobody who grew up broke talks like that. But here's the thing. You work hard, you're respectful, you're trying to learn. That's what matters. Where you came from. That's your business. It was perhaps the greatest compliment Alexander had ever received. 1 month into his experiment, Alexander sat on the steps of his boarding house, watching the neighborhood come alive on a Saturday evening. Kids played in the street. Music drifted from windows. Elena emerged from her building in a simple sundress, her hair down, looking absolutely beautiful. Ready? She asked. They'd planned this, a picnic in Central Park, completely ordinary, completely perfect. They spread a blanket near the lake, sharing sandwiches Elena had made and fruit Alexander had gotten at employee discount for the grocery store. I need to tell you something, Alexander said, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. I'm ready to end the experiment. Elena's face fell. Oh, I see. Not because I failed, he said quickly. Because I've learned what I needed to learn. Elena, These 6 weeks have taught me more about life, about people, about myself than the previous 35 years combined. I understand now what matters. It's not money or status or power. It's this: connection, purpose, the dignity of work, the value of community. It's you." Elena's eyes widened. "Alexander." "I love you," he said simply. "I love your strength and your kindness and your brutal honesty. I love how you see people, really see them. I love that you taught me to see myself. And yes, I'm a billionaire. I'm about to have my assets unfrozen, go back to my company, my life. But I'm not the same person who left that life. And if you'll have me, I want to build something different. Something real." Elena was crying, tears streaming down her face. "You can't just say things like that." "Why not?" "Because I've been in love with you for 3 years," she burst out. 3 years of watching you, knowing you were completely out of reach, telling myself I was just being stupid. And then these last weeks, working beside you, seeing you grow and change and become this person who's even more incredible than I imagined. Alexander, you're killing me." He moved closer, cupping her face in his hands, hands that were now calloused and strong from real work. "Then let me make it better. Elena Martinez, I'm not asking you to marry a billionaire. I'm asking if you'll give a chance to the guy who washes dishes and stocks shelves and is learning that the best things in life aren't things at all." She laughed through her tears. "You're so earnest it's ridiculous. Is that a yes?" Instead of answering, Elena kissed him. It was a kiss that tasted like tears and hope, like sunset and new beginnings. When they pulled apart, Alexander felt like his entire life had been leading to this moment, this woman, this truth. "Yes," Elena whispered. "Yes to giving us a chance. Yes to seeing who we can become together. Yes to everything." They sat on their blanket as the stars emerged, hands intertwined, talking about futures and dreams. Alexander told her his plans, not just for his company, but for change. Real change. "I want to start a foundation," he said. "Not just writing checks, but creating opportunities. Scholarships for people like you, like Miguel, like everyone I've met these past weeks. People who have the potential but not the access. I want to pay living wages at all my properties. I want to fund healthcare initiatives for conditions like your mother's. I want to use what I have to lift others up." "That's beautiful," Elena said softly. "But Alexander, you can't save everyone." "I know," he said. "But I can help some. And if everyone with resources did the same, maybe the world would be different." Elena rested her head on his shoulder. "When do you unfreeze the assets?" "Monday. But Elena, I want to keep the apartment in Queens. I want to keep washing dishes once a week, staying connected to this world. I don't want to lose this person I've become." "You won't," Elena promised. "Because I won't let you. That's what you're signing up for with me. Someone who'll call you out when you're being an oblivious billionaire, who'll remind you what matters." "Perfect," Alexander said, kissing her temple. "That's exactly what I need." Monday morning, Alexander walked into James's office wearing his cheap jeans and t-shirt, looking nothing like the billionaire CEO who'd left 7 weeks earlier. His lawyer's jaw dropped. "Alexander, my God, what happened to you?" "I grew up," Alexander said simply. "Let's unfreeze the assets." The process took 3 days. News spread quickly. Alexander Chen was back, his fortune intact, the investigation revealing he'd been completely innocent of his partner's crimes. His phone exploded with messages. Old friends, business associates, people he hadn't heard from since the wedding disaster suddenly remembered they cared about him. He ignored most of them. There was only one person he needed to see. Victoria sat in the restaurant of her choosing, the Four Seasons, looking immaculate in designer clothes. When Alexander arrived in his simple suit, nice but not extravagant, her lip curled slightly. "Alexander, I'm glad you reached out. I know the last few weeks must have been difficult." "They were enlightening," he corrected, sitting across from her. "Victoria, I didn't come here to reconcile. I came to say thank you." She blinked. "Thank you. You showed me the truth about what our marriage would have been. A transaction, not a partnership. You loved my money, not me. And by making that clear, you freed me to find something real." Victoria's face hardened. Oh, please. You found the maid? How deliciously cliché. What is this, a fairy tale? Actually, yes, Alexander said calmly. Elena is the kindest, strongest, most genuine person I've ever met. She saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. She challenged me to be better. And she loved me when I had nothing but $5,000 and a dream. That's not a fairy tale, Victoria. That's reality. She loved you because she knew you'd get your money back, Victoria snapped. Don't be naive, Alexander. Everyone wants something. You're wrong, Alexander said quietly. Elena didn't know I'd get the money back. For all she knew, I really had lost everything. She still helped me, still supported me, still let me fall in love with her. That's the difference between you and her. She sees people, not price tags. Victoria's composure cracked. You think you're better than me now? You spent 6 weeks playing poor and suddenly you're enlightened? Please. Give it a month back in your real life and you'll forget all about your precious lessons. Maybe, Alexander acknowledged. That's why I'm keeping my apartment in Queens. That's why I'm still washing dishes at the diner once a week. That's why I'm building a foundation to help people like Elena, like Miguel, like everyone I met. Because you're right about one thing, it would be easy to forget. So I'm choosing not to. He stood to leave, but Victoria grabbed his arm. Alexander, wait. Please. Her voice cracked, and for a moment, he saw something real beneath her polished exterior. Regret, maybe even grief. I know I hurt you. I know I was wrong. But we were good together once, weren't we? Before the money mattered so much. Alexander looked at her sadly. Victoria, I don't think the money ever didn't matter to you. And that's okay, you're not wrong for wanting security, for valuing the lifestyle. But I need more than that. I need someone who'll love me on my worst days, not just my most profitable ones. He gently removed her hand from his arm. I hope you find what you're looking for. I really do. But it's not with me. As he left the restaurant, Alexander felt the final piece of his old life fall away. He was free. His return to the office was surreal. His assistant, Karen, burst into tears when she saw him. Mr. Chen, we were so worried. Everything has been chaos without you. It's just Alexander, he corrected gently. And I'm sorry for the chaos. Let's fix it. But as he stepped back into his CEO role, Alexander did things differently. His first act was raising the minimum wage for all company employees to $25 an hour. His second was establishing comprehensive healthcare coverage that included experimental treatments for rare diseases. His third was creating a scholarship fund for employees' children. Sir, his CFO said carefully, these changes will cost millions. Good, Alexander said. That's the point. These people make our success possible. They deserve to share in it. The board was less convinced. At the emergency meeting they called, the chairman, Mr. Rothschild, leaned forward with concern. Alexander, we're glad you're back. But these proposed changes, they're going to significantly impact our profit margins. Our shareholders will make slightly less money while our employees make enough to actually live on, Alexander interrupted. Mr. Rothschild, I spent the last 6 weeks living on minimum wage. I know exactly what it's like to choose between medicine and food, to work 3 jobs and still struggle. Our company can afford this. The question isn't whether we can, but whether we will. This is very idealistic, another board member said skeptically. But business isn't about ideals. Then maybe it should be, Alexander countered. Look, I'm not asking the company to become a charity. I'm asking us to be ethical, to recognize that our workers aren't resources to be exploited, but humans to be valued. And if you can't support that vision, then maybe you shouldn't be on this board. The room fell silent. It was the most aggressive Alexander had ever been with his own board, but he meant every word. Mr. Rothschild studied him carefully. You've changed. Yes, Alexander agreed. I have. To his surprise, the older man smiled. Good. Your father would have been proud. He always said business should serve people, not the other way around. We lost sight of that. Maybe you can help us find it again. He looked around the table. I propose we support Alexander's initiatives. All in favor. The vote was unanimous. After the meeting, as Alexander returned to his office, he found Elena waiting. She looked out of place in her simple dress, surrounded by glass and steel and expensive art. But to Alexander, she'd never looked more right. "Elena, what are you doing here? Your assistant called me. Said you were staging a revolution and thought I'd want to see it." Elena smiled. "Living wage, comprehensive health care, scholarships. Alexander, do you know what you've just done?" "The right thing," he said hopefully. "Yes," she laughed, throwing her arms around him. "Yes, exactly that. I'm so proud of you." He held her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, something cheap and floral from the drugstore that smelled like home. "Elena, there's something else I want to do. For your mother." She pulled back, wary. "Alexander, we talked about this. I know, and I'm not trying to throw money at your problems. But hear me out." He led her to his desk, pulling up information on his computer. "There's an experimental treatment for MS, clinical trials at Johns Hopkins. They've had incredible results, not a cure, but significant improvement in mobility and quality of life. Your mother qualifies." Elena's eyes filled with tears as she read the screen. "Alexander, we can't afford. The foundation I'm creating will sponsor participants who can't afford the treatment. Your mother will be one of the first. Not because you're with me, but because she deserves a chance. Because everyone deserves a chance." Elena was crying fully now. "You're really doing this? A foundation to help people like us." "People like us," Alexander corrected, taking her hands. "Elena, I'm not separate from you anymore. I'm not above or apart. These last weeks taught me that we're all in this together. And those of us who have more have a responsibility to those who don't." She kissed him then, in his office, not caring who saw or what they thought. When they broke apart, she was smiling through her tears. "Okay, billionaire. You can stay. Just for that," he teased. "And because you still wash dishes," she added. "Don't forget, Saturday morning, 5 a.m. "Wouldn't miss it," Alexander promised. That evening, Alexander took Elena to meet his family. His father, who'd retired to Florida, and his sister, Rachel, who ran a non-profit in Boston. They gathered at a quiet restaurant, nothing fancy, just family. Rachel hugged him hard. "You scared us," she whispered. "But whatever happened, you seem lighter." "I am," Alexander confirmed. He turned to Elena, who looked nervous. "Dad, Rachel, I want you to meet Elena Martinez. She's the one who saved you from Victoria," his father interrupted, smiling warmly. "Alexander told us all about it on the phone." "Elena, my dear, thank you. I never liked that woman." "Dad," Rachel protested, but she was grinning. "What? It's true. She was cold as ice." He took Elena's hands in his. "You, though, Alexander says you taught him how to live. That's the greatest gift anyone's ever given him." Elena blushed. "I just showed him what life is like for most people, Mr. Chen. Call me Richard. And from what Alexander tells me, you did much more than that. You showed him his own heart." Richard's eyes grew distant. "My wife, Alexander's mother, used to say that the measure of a person isn't what they do when they have everything, but what they do when they have nothing. You both passed that test." Over dinner, they talked about Alexander's plans. The foundation, the changes at the company, the apartment he was keeping in Queens. Rachel was enthusiastic, Richard thoughtfully supportive. "Just promise me one thing," Richard said as dessert arrived. "Don't lose yourself in trying to save the world. You can't fix everything, son." "I know," Alexander said, glancing at Elena. "But I can fix some things. And that has to be enough." Later, as Alexander walked Elena home to Queens, taking the subway like they always did, she was quiet. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That this is all moving so fast," she admitted. 6 weeks ago, I was your housekeeper. Now I'm meeting your family, your mother's getting treatment, you're restructuring your company. It feels like a dream." "Is that bad?" Alexander asked, concerned. "No," Elena said slowly. "But dreams can end. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for you to realize you're a billionaire and I'm me. Alexander stopped walking, turning to face her on the subway platform. Around them, the city rushed on, people coming home from work, students heading out for the night, the endless flow of New York life. Elena Martinez, he said clearly, you are the bravest, most incredible person I've ever met. You raised yourself and your mother in a foreign country. You put your dreams on hold to care for someone you love. You risked your job to save a stranger from a terrible mistake. You taught me what it means to be human. If anything, I keep waiting for you to realize you can do better than me. That's ridiculous, Elena said, but she was smiling. Exactly as ridiculous as you thinking you're not enough. He took her face in his hands. I'm not going anywhere. This isn't a dream that ends. This is real life, messy and complicated and more beautiful than any fairy tale. Promise, she whispered. Promise, he said, and kissed her as the subway roared into the station. 3 months later, Alexander stood at the front of a newly renovated community center in Queens, watching as the ribbon was cut on the Learning Forward Foundation's first education center. The space was bright and welcoming, with computers, tutoring rooms, and classrooms designed for people of any age to finish their education. Elena stood beside him, holding his hand, tears streaming down her face. It's beautiful, she whispered. It's necessary, Alexander corrected. Look who's here. Miguel from the diner was there with his grandchildren. Tommy the cook, looking uncomfortable in dress clothes but proud. Maria, whose daughter's quinceanera had been beautiful partly thanks to a foundation grant. Mrs. Chen and Bobby from the boarding house. Mr. Park from the grocery store. Donna from the diner. And dozens of others, students, workers, dreamers who'd never had a chance. This center is named after someone special, Alexander said as the crowd quieted. Rosa Martinez was a teacher in Colombia, a woman who loved literature and learning. She came to this country to give her daughter a better life, and even when illness tried to stop her, she never stopped teaching. Mom. He gestured to where Rosa sat in her wheelchair, looking stronger than she had in years thanks to the treatment. This center is dedicated to you and everyone like you. Teachers without classrooms, students without schools, dreamers without opportunities. Today, that changes. The crowd erupted in applause. Rosa was crying, Elena was crying, Alexander might have been crying a little too. That evening, back at Alexander's penthouse, which Elena now shared, though she'd insisted on keeping her mother's apartment as well, they hosted a dinner. Not a fancy fundraiser, but a real meal with real friends. Miguel and his wife. Tommy and his service dog. Maria and her daughter. Mr. Park and his grandson. Donna and her partner. Bobby and Mrs. Chen. Rachel had flown in from Boston. Richard had driven up from Florida. Alexander looked around his dining room table, now crowded with people who 8 months ago had been strangers, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. A toast, Richard said, raising his glass. To new beginnings, second chances, and love that teaches us who we really are. Hear, hear, everyone chorused. Later, as guests were leaving, Miguel pulled Alexander aside. You know, when you started at the diner, I thought you'd last maybe a week. Rich boy playing poor. He shook his head. But you proved me wrong. You worked hard, you listened, you learned. That takes character. You taught me, Alexander said simply. You all did. After everyone left, Alexander and Elena stood on the balcony, looking out at the city. From up here, Queens was visible in the distance, a constellation of lights marking the neighborhood that had changed his life. Do you ever regret it? Elena asked. Leaving your old life behind? I didn't leave it behind, Alexander said. I brought the important parts forward. The resources, the ability to help. I just left behind the illusions. That's very philosophical, Elena teased. I learned from the best. He pulled a small box from his pocket, his heart racing. Elena, I know we've only been officially together for 3 months. I know you could argue it's too soon. But I've spent the last 8 months learning who I really am, and the one thing I know with absolute certainty is that I want to spend my life with you. Elena's eyes went wide as he opened the box. The ring inside wasn't the biggest diamond or the most expensive. It was a simple emerald, her birthstone, surrounded by tiny diamonds that sparkled like stars. "It's not about the money," Alexander said quickly. "I mean, yes, it's a nice ring, but I'd marry you with a ring from a vending machine. I'd marry you with no ring at all. Elena Martinez, will you marry me? Not because I'm rich, not because I can give you things, but because I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." Elena was laughing and crying at the same time. "You really have to ask. After everything." "Yes," Alexander said firmly, "because you deserve to be asked. You deserve to be chosen. You deserve someone who sees you and loves you exactly as you are, no pretense, no games, just truth." "Then yes," Elena said, throwing her arms around him. "Yes, I'll marry you. I'll marry the man who washes dishes and visits his old landlady and never forgets where he came from. I'll marry my best friend. I'll marry you." The wedding, 6 months later, was nothing like the ceremony that never happened with Victoria. They got married at the community center, surrounded by their real community. Elena wore a simple ivory dress she'd picked out herself. Alexander wore a suit, nice but not ostentatious. Rosa, stronger now and walking with assistance, gave Elena away. Miguel catered the reception with help from Tommy. Mr. Park provided flowers from his nephew's shop. The boarding house crew came en masse. Alexander's father officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose. "I'm supposed to give a speech," Richard said during the reception. "Something profound about love and marriage. But honestly, watching these two teaches me more than I could ever teach them. They met across a divide that shouldn't exist but does, wealth and poverty, privilege and struggle. And they chose to bridge that divide, not by one person descending or the other ascending, but by meeting in the middle and building something new together. That's what marriage is. Not about being the same, but about building something bigger than either of you alone." Elena's mother spoke too, her voice stronger than it had been in years. "My daughter taught me that love is a choice. Every day, she chose to love me, to care for me, even when it cost her dreams. Now she's taught Alexander the same lesson, that love means choosing each other, every day, especially on the hard days. Especially when it costs you something." When it was time for their vows, Alexander took Elena's hands. "Elena, before you, I thought I knew what I wanted. Success, respect, a partnership that looked good on paper. You taught me what I needed, truth, connection, purpose. You showed me that the richest life isn't measured in dollars, but in moments like this. You made me want to be better, and then you helped me become better. I promise to always see you, to always choose you, to always remember that our love is built on truth, not transaction. I promise to wash dishes every Saturday." The crowd laughed. "And I promise that no matter how much money I have or don't have, I'll love you exactly the same." Elena's vows were simpler. "Alexander, you saw me when I was invisible. You heard me when I spoke truth you didn't want to hear. You chose to change, and then you helped change the world around you. I promise to always keep you grounded, to always challenge you, to always remind you that your value isn't in what you have but in who you are. I promise to love you on paycheck days and on bill-paying days, in penthouses and in boarding houses, in sickness and in health. I promise to never let you forget where you came from or where we're going together." When they kissed, the room erupted. But for Alexander, the world narrowed to just Elena. Her smile, her tears, her joy. Later, as they danced their first dance to a song played by a local high school band, who'd won a foundation scholarship, Elena whispered, "Did you ever think we'd be here?" "Honestly, no," Alexander admitted. 8 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be married to my housekeeper, living partially in Queens, running a foundation, and happier than I'd ever been, I would have thought they were crazy." "And now?" Elena prompted. "Now I know they would have been right. The best things in life are the ones we never see coming." They swayed together, surrounded by everyone who mattered, and Alexander felt something he'd been chasing his whole life without knowing it: peace. 1 year later, Alexander and Elena stood in the same community center, now expanded with a second floor. Elena taught evening literature classes there, finally pursuing her dream of teaching. The classes were always full, immigrants learning English through Shakespeare, adults finishing high school through poetry, kids finding escape in books. Alexander still went to the diner on Saturdays, still washed dishes beside Miguel. He'd added a Wednesday evening shift at a homeless shelter, serving meals alongside Tommy. His company continued to thrive, but now it was known as much for its ethical practices as its innovations. The foundation had expanded beyond New York, establishing centers in 5 cities. Thousands of people had received scholarships, healthcare assistance, job training. Rosa had become a spokesperson, visiting centers to talk about the power of education and the importance of never giving up on dreams. "You created a legacy," Elena told Alexander one evening as they reviewed the Foundation's annual report. "We created a legacy," he corrected. "None of this happens without you. You're the one who teaches the classes, runs the programs, knows every person by name. You're the heart of all of this. And you're the mind," Elena said, kissing him. "We're a good team." "The best team," Alexander agreed. That night, as they lay in bed in their apartment, they'd moved to a modest place in Queens permanently, keeping the penthouse only as an occasional retreat. Elena took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "Alexander," she said softly, "what would you say if I told you our team was about to add a new member?" It took him a moment to understand. When he did, joy exploded through him like fireworks. "Really? We're going to have a baby." "We're going to have a baby," Elena confirmed, laughing at his expression. Alexander pulled her close, overwhelmed with emotion. "Our child is going to grow up knowing both worlds. The resources to help people and the understanding of what people need. The privilege of education and the humility of work. They're going to be amazing. They're going to be loved," Elena said simply. "That's what matters most." As Alexander drifted off to sleep that night, his wife in his arms and a baby on the way, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. The cancelled wedding that had been a gift. The experiment that had been a transformation. The maid who had forced him to pretend he'd lost his fortune and, in doing so, had helped him find something far more valuable. He'd started with billions and thought himself rich. He'd lost it all and discovered wealth. He'd gained it back and learned that true fortune was measured in love, in purpose, in connection. "Thank you," he whispered to Elena, who was already asleep. "For what?" she murmured. "For seeing me. For saving me. For loving me." Elena smiled in the darkness. "Always," she promised. "Always." And in that moment, Alexander Chen, former billionaire, current husband, future father, permanent student of life, knew he had everything that mattered. Not because of what he owned, but because of who he'd become. Not because of what he could buy, but because of what he'd learned to value. Not because he was a billionaire, but because he was, finally and truly, himself. The end was really just the beginning. And it was going to be extraordinary. The richest person is not who has the most, but who needs the least. The happiest person is not who gets everything they want, but who appreciates everything they have. And the wisest person is not who never falls, but who learns to rise. Alexander and Elena Chen, founders of the Learning Forward Foundation.